The ideas that gave birth to our nation are the ideas that our nation is resistant to right now, and we should talk about that all the time.
In a world where narratives are shaped by corporations and gatekeepers, independent voices matter more than ever. Badlands Media brings together citizen journalists, researchers, and independent thinkers.
The truth is triggering.
Question the narrative. Explore the facts.
It's authenticity, courage, resilience.
Search for the truth others won't.
It's not about being first or being right.
The information war is changing.
It's about being authentic.
Embrace the friction.
Embrace the friction.
Shut the f*** up.
Authentically antagonizing. Join the movement.
I'm going to say how I feel.
Follow Badlands Media.
This is about the future.
The Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Spellbreakers. I'm Matt. Tonight, the blue micromoon is the subject of our show. We're going to talk about the moon. You know, it hasn't been a particularly taxing news week. I would say there isn't anything that's really just gotten out of hand that we have to cope with. Would you agree? Would you agree that it's been, it's given us a little bit of a mercy. We had Memorial Day weekend, but I feel like, nevertheless, it's such confusing times we live in that every week, even if it's a normal week, feels like, to me at least, it feels like I'm just juggling all these things in my mind, trying to keep track of all the things that are going on. I don't know, maybe you feel that way too. Like the Iran thing, it's like, it's not even juggling the information so much. It's juggling the different narrative interpretations that are going on. I'm trying to keep track of all the different interpretations that people have about what's going on over there. We got the different schools of thought, and we've got we've got the mainstream ones, and we've got the alternative ones here on Badlands, and alternative ones. The one that I tend to follow most is the one I mentioned, Promethean updates, and that this is Trump's war against the city of London. And that it's not really so much against Iran. It's about keeping the Straits of Hormuz open. It's about busting the use of Iran by the globalist cartel as its mean cat's paw, primarily to keep the Straits of Hormuz under threat so that they can keep the world extortion racket over oil going, and that Trump's being very successful in what he's doing, but it may not look like it that at any given moment. That's one school of thought. It tends to align with my school of thought from before even Trump was president quite a bit. So I suppose that makes a difference. But I was reading X, and there was an X post by someone I follow he's a childhood friend who's a physicist now. He's somebody I knew in fifth and sixth grade. He's a physicist, and I'm actually talking about a paper he wrote at a conference in 2 weeks. And so I like him. I followed him because of that. He writes interesting articles, and he doesn't write political stuff, but occasionally, everybody who's a liberal, they're going to surface their political beliefs at some point or another and make it known. And it's always going to be sort of in the vein of, and as everybody knows, Trump is awful. Sort of got, you're like, oh God, not one of these. And so he's talking about, what was he talking about? Oh, his whole thing about Iran is, Trump just needs to take the L. Take the L. Trump's lost the war, needs to take the L. And I'm going, that's so opposite of where I am. But then he's talking about, the conservatives. He's berating them, and then of course he's talking about people who watch Fox News. He even called them those. If you're watching Fox News and you're getting your interpretation from them, I'm like, I'm not watching Fox News. I can tell you that. I watch their clips sometimes, and then we've got things like. I think here in Badlands, we've got sort of the cynical interpretation, which is the most important thing of all is to never be rug pulled. Never be rug pulled, because that means you're stupid. That means you're a fool. So whatever you do, never be rug. So never believe in anything too much, because somebody's going to come along and say, "Oh, you buy into that narrative," So, we've got so many different, and then we've got thankfully, Sammy the Squirrel has got his blog. He sent me the new one. Put a link to that. It's just like here's sort of factually what happened this week. So that's that's nice to have that too. But eventually we'll see how it turns out. But it wasn't like it was a big hairy news week that way. Oh, there's peace deal. There's not. We'll see, right? So it was Memorial Day too. I should do some sponsors. Tonight's episode of Badlands is being brought to you in part by our friends at Badlands Shop, right? Badlands Shop. All right. Badlands Shop, right? Badlands Shop. Hey, have you checked out Badlands Shop lately? You might be surprised at what you've been missing. From thoughtful gifts and unique finds to everyday household essentials and personal care item must-haves. There's truly something for everyone at the Badlands Shop. But here's what makes it different. Every single purchase you make is so much more than just buying stuff. You're investing directly in the movement, our movement. You're empowering America First businesses, lifting up fellow Badlanders, and supporting the creators who are building the community with us. Thank you for being a part of this. Your support means everything. Head over now to badlandsmedia.tv/shop and click shop on the main menu at badlandsmedia.tv and discover your new favorite brands. That's badlandsmedia.tv/shop. All right. And we're also sponsored tonight by Save Pulse. Do I have copy for them? I think I have copy for them. Save Pulse. Unexpected health emergencies don't wait. And with Save Pulse, you can stay prepared from trusted medications like amoxicillin, erythromycin, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, to the medical emergency kit designed to help support over 30 common illnesses. Save Pulse makes it easy to stock up on essential health supplies. At Save Pulse, keeping your family prepared has never been easier, and it's all delivered through a simple, streamlined ordering process at prices you can feel good about. Whether you need an emergency kit or you're just stocking up on everyday essentials, now's the time to be ready for whatever comes your way. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/meds today and use promo code Badlands to save 20%. That's badlandsmedia.tv/meds, promo code Badlands. Feel okay. All right. Good. Welcome to our sponsors for tonight's show. So yeah, it was Memorial Day. Memorial Day is such an interesting holiday lately. You know, it's become sort of a second. It's sort of become a second Veterans Day. You know, because it's good. We just don't have as many people die in wars as much anymore. Because it used to be about people who died in wars, right? And then we had Veterans Day for everybody who had served. But we just don't have as many people who die in wars lately. And we've got, you know, the World War II generations are very long in age. Some of them are still around, thankfully. And, you know, and every war since then has been less and less, so that, you know, if you're certain areas of the military, as some of our Badlands hosts have been, then yeah, you're in danger of death. You have as much as probably any time in history. But the number of people that are in those roles is much smaller. So, and I remember, you know, when I was a kid, there was Vietnam War was going on, and there was just, you know, there were just names every week that would be published in the paper of people from. I lived in Iowa, so it was Iowans who had been killed in Vietnam, and one of our family friends was from church. Their son was killed in 1970. Yeah, and. So you knew people, you know, but it's rarer and rarer. And also, you know, we're in a time of cultural change demographically. And one doesn't know whether new people coming into the country, whether they feel any stake in celebrating Memorial Day. But anyway, I like Memorial Day a lot, not just because it's a relaxing weekend. One of the things I like is I like Turner Classic Movies. I've been a fan of that for years. Ted Turner just passed away, of course. You know, he's an interesting guy, but I really thank him for bringing about Turner Classic Movies. And every year they have a Memorial Day. They just show war movies all weekend during Memorial Day on TCM. And it, you know, they vary them around because there's so many of them. And I watched a few of them this year. I watched Ace of Aces, an early talkie with Richard Dix. You know, early, like 1933. It's about World War I, and he's an American flyer in World War I. I thought that I'd never seen it before. I really liked that. I love movies. I love 30s movies. But then I watched a movie that some of you might have seen. It came out when I was a kid, which is Midway, which came out in 1976, and it starred Charlton Heston and Henry Fonda. And a bunch of other people. It was like every white guy who'd ever been in any war movie ever. It was like the last roundup of them. And so they made Midway in 1976 about the Battle of Midway. Charlton Heston plays a fictional character, and but a lot of the roles are based on real people, including Japanese. Toshiro Mifune is in it, the famous Japanese actor. His voice is dubbed in it, and so it's got a Japanese speaking English in the movie. And really, it's not like it's a great movie. It was in Sense-Around when it came out, by the way. It made your seat rumble, you know. But the subject matter is so compelling. The Battle of Midway is so compelling. And, of course, there's a time warp movie, I think, later on. Kirk Douglas is in it, where like a modern aircraft carrier goes back in time. But this is like so supposedly based on the real battle. And it does an okay job of explaining it, but the Battle of Midway was very important because basically it was a roll of the dice for both sides. Really, it was whoever, you know, the battle. It could have been inconclusive. It's not like it had to be the pivotal battle. It was, but it came 6 months after Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese were coming back, and the Americans met them at Midway. And how that even came about was a stroke of luck. And essentially the Japanese brought 4 aircraft carriers, and their aim was to annihilate the rest of the American fleet in the Pacific, because our aircraft carriers had escaped Pearl Harbor. They weren't at Pearl Harbor, so they escaped damage. But then there was the Battle of Coral Sea, and there was damage to one of the aircraft carriers was sunk. And we were really on life support with our fleet. And we sent basically all our aircraft carriers remaining out to meet the Japanese fleet because we figured out where they were going to be. They didn't know we were going to be there. And we surprised them, and there was a bunch of stroke of luck that happened. And the Americans wound up losing one aircraft carrier of the 4 that were there. The Japanese lost all 4. The Americans sunk all 4 remaining Japanese aircraft carriers. And aircraft carriers were at the time, they were it as far as the Navy. You know, going into the war, people thought battleships with their big guns were still the state of the art. And they learned after Pearl Harbor pretty quickly that the era of the battleship was over. In some ways, you know, were it not for the loss of life of the men at Pearl Harbor, and some women were killed too, I guess. So, but not, were it not for that, Pearl Harbor wasn't the worst thing in the world. The Japanese didn't have any success in invading Hawaii or the mainland, and they sank. Well, it's not like the battleships were useless. They were pretty useful, but as floating guns. Don't get me wrong. You could pound the beaches before the invasion. That was useful, but they were not the decisive weapons in the war. Those would be aircraft carriers. And so the Americans sank all 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, and they only did that through really a stroke of luck of timing and screw-ups by the Japanese. You see, there were 2. There are several ways to attack by air. So, you know, the planes would take off, and you had 2 kinds of bombers. You had torpedo bombers, which would, you know, you'd fly and then you release a torpedo and it would go into the side of the ship like a submarine torpedo. Or you do dive bombers, where you come down from up high and you try to send a bomb right through the deck. And it's actually because the sides of the ship are strong and metal, that the torpedoes, you know, they can be not as useful unless you have a really good hit. But going through the decks, that's how the battleships were sunk at Pearl Harbor, is because they were Japanese used dive bombers to go down into to blow everything up through the wooden decks, which were the weak point. So, you know, and the Japanese got caught in swapping. They said, "Oh, let's put on torpedoes. No, let's switch them over to dive bombers." And also, they had to attack the island of Midway. And just in the middle of all that, the Americans attacked just right at the right time through a stroke of luck. But not all the Americans escaped. So, in honor of Memorial Day, I just want to call out some really brave people who saved the war. Because if the Americans had lost that battle, if it had been the American aircraft carriers that went to the bottom of the ocean and not the Japanese would have been wide open to invade Hawaii and the West Coast. And it's likely, if not win the war, that they wouldn't have lost it. Let's just say that. And all that happened in a day, just over the course of a couple hours, through luck, timing, and courage. And probably the best thing from Memorial Day to remember, because it's been on my mind all week, is I don't remember the name of the squadron, but there was a group of torpedo bombers that the first 40 guys went out in torpedo bombers in the first attack on the Japanese when they found out where they were through scouting planes. And there were 40 of them in the squadron, and they sent them out, and they didn't have fighter cover. So when you would send the bombers in, it was good. You needed fighter cover too, to attack the ship, just to strafe it, and so that they couldn't shoot at your planes, you know. And they didn't have fighter cover. They just went in naked. It was desperation move. It was like, maybe we can hit them. And 40 guys went out, and 39 didn't make it back. Only one guy made it back, name of George Gay. He was shot. His plane was shot down, but he was rescued later. All the other guys were blown out of the sky. You know, but for one guy, they would have all been blown out of the sky, and they didn't damage the Japanese ships at all. but the timing did slow it down and throw everything off by just enough. And that's sort of how the war was won, by those guys. So I don't know. Memorial Day. All right, let's get to given that, let's talk about the moon. We can talk about the moon. Let's kick back and talk about the moon. How long did I talk about Memorial Day? Where are we? Oh, it's only 21 minutes. Sometimes I get on my introductory talk and I just got to blow off steam sometime before we get to the talk. Sometimes I can go right in. If it's a deep topic, I like to go right in and fill up the hour and a half with it. But sometimes we just need to be a little bit chill, you know. The blue micromoon is here. So let's talk about what that means. So this week we got a full moon on, what is it tonight? On Sunday. Is that a full moon on Monday is the old Duran Duran song. Okay, full moon on Sunday. Full moon on Sunday. And it's the second full moon of May. That's the blue moon, right? Well, maybe. So, first, I just wanted to show you this. I saw this. This made me laugh. Somebody has a proposal to, you remember in Lord of the Rings, there's the two kings, and they sail through them. It's in the book, and it's also in the movie. Somebody has the idea of trying to do that with Lewis and Clark. Build these huge things of Lewis and Clark. And I thought that's really interesting. And there's a guy who has a website, and he's really keen on doing this. But the thing is, he wants to build them. So Lewis and Clark, 1804, right? Everybody knows that. Sort of, it's not the bicentennial or the 250th, but it's we're celebrating the whole thing, right? So they want to build them on the upper Mississippi near the Twin Cities, and St. Croix area, between where the Mississippi is between Wisconsin and Minnesota, because that's where the Mississippi is most like a gorge, and northern Iowa too. Those are the most scenic parts of the Mississippi, and which is interesting. There's cliffs there where they could make it look like that. But if you know anything about Lewis and Clark, there's a little bit of a problem with that. It's not like it's a problem, but it's like, well, okay. The thing is, the Lewis and Clark didn't explore the upper Mississippi. They explored the Missouri, and they didn't go the upper Mississippi. So it's a little bit, I don't know. I want to be in favor of it. I want to be in favor of it. All right. So we've got blue moon. A rare blue moon arrives this weekend and won't be back until December 28. A rare blue micromoon. So we got two blue micromoon. All right. So two things. A rare blue micromoon. Okay. All right. Blue. Let's talk about what a blue moon means. So a lot of you know all this stuff already, but we're just chilling tonight. We're just chilling in honor of the squadron that went out and got blown out of the sky so that America could win the war. Blue moon, second full moon in a calendar month. So we got full moon on Sunday on the 31st. And we had a full moon on May 1st, so it's the second full moon in a month, right? I think everybody's heard this now at this point. So it's an artifact of our calendar system. And the last one was August 2024. It comes around every 2 years or so, this happens. Next one will be December 31st, 2028. So New Year's Eve, 2028. So here's a little question for you. What month can there never be a blue moon in what month of the year? In what month of the year? It can't be in February. Even when there's 29 days, I don't think there's enough, because it's 29 and a half days from full moon to full moon. So there's not enough days in February. So that's a blue. So if you're going to put on your Neil deGrasse Tyson hat, this is the kind of things he's like, well, it's just the calendar. It doesn't really have any astronomical significance. Neil deGrasse, he's like that. He left UT. He left my alma mater. He said bad things about people I like, so I don't like him. I don't like him. He's actually slandered people that are good people that I know when he left UT astronomy department. We didn't overlap, thankfully. All right, but the thing is, this definition of the blue moon, I can't help not trashing him. Okay, blue moon, modern definition since the 1940s. This is what this blue moon is. Okay, so we'll get to this. Eleanor 2000 says, Matt, my grandfather was killed by a kamikaze planes at the Battle of Leyte Gulf on the Gambier Bay escort carrier, Philippines, 1944. Lieutenant Vereen Bell destroyed my dad, who was only 10. Thanks, Eleanor 2000, for mentioning that. If anybody else wants to mention somebody who died, I'll see if I can. Thank you. EC2 was here. Says one of my great grandmothers claimed to be descended from William Clark. Unable to verify. One of my family members. I don't know if I'm in the direct line of him or not, but one of my grandmother. Her name was maiden name was Weiser, and she and I am descended from a guy in Pennsylvania named Conrad Weiser, who was a chief negotiator of Pennsylvania with the Iroquois Indian, and really established the British treaties with the Indians there. But his great grandson was on the Lewis and Clark expedition, Philip Weiser, and there's a town. I think the town of Weiser, Idaho, is named after him. But I don't know if I'm descended from him. It's cool. Thank you for mentioning that. EC2. I'm thinking of Amazon Web Services again. EC was here. It was the Hornets Torpedo Squadron. Okay, yes. The rest of the Hornets planes went on the mission to nowhere. See, some of you know more about this than I do. So, and the movie fictionalizes it. It compresses the action. And Charlton Heston's character is a composite character after several people. But I think it does a really good job of conveying the urgency of the situation in that movie. So thank you. All right. Yeah, Sammy the Squirrel, we lost entire squadrons and did no damage to the carriers at first. We just kept throwing bodies at them until we won. Yeah, we got lucky. And then finally there was that hit that basically took out 3 of the 4 aircraft carriers in one raid. And then they came back for the 4th. Yeah, amazing. You know, and we lose track of that. So that, you know, the 6 months between Pearl Harbor and Midway were, you know, imagine living in those days. That was my grandfather. He graduated in the class of 1942 in high school. So June of 40. That's, you know, think of those kids. You know, they were seniors in high school when Pearl Harbor happened, and then, you know, America's at war and losing. There was not a lot of good news for a while in the Pacific. Until Midway was just, and then after Midway, it's almost like the Japanese then had to protect the home islands. And there has been the Doolittle raid, the bombing raid against them too by that point. So, all right. So the blue moon, the modern definition of a blue moon is sort of boring. So what? 2 full moons in a month. It's the artifact of the calendar. Yeah. So this month we have May 1st, there was a full moon, and then May 31st, there's a full moon. And a full moon's always exciting. I mean, I'm not going to say that it isn't, but the fact that it lines up every 2 years or so that you get squeezed 2 in the same month, you know, it's an artifact of our calendar system, which, you know, is okay. But did you know that there is actually sometimes the moon can appear actually literally blue? Look how they're blue. I didn't know this. I found this out. The rarest blue moon is the one caused not by calendars, but by catastrophe. Moon really can appear blue, but only when Earth's atmosphere becomes an optical filter, usually after volcanic explosions or massive Krakatoa in 1883 and Mount St. Helens in 1980. A genuinely atmospheric blue moon is usually pale blue-gray or lavender blue, or slightly turquoise and not neon sapphire orbs. So I asked Gemini to make a blue moon for me, and it came up with a really lurid one. This is not a real photo. I said make it in front of Krakatoa, and it wasn't that good. But you can imagine pale blue moon because of it, and it happens because of usually when we have atmospheric particles, they turn things red. They would turn the moon red. So, but in this case, the particles are large, and they block out all the light but blue light. They scatter. They don't block it out. They scatter all the light except for the blue light, and that's how it's called the Mie scattering, MIE, named after a German physicist named Mie who discovered the. It's named after me. So anyway, but it also can be fires. Like I didn't know. There was this article, the day the sun turned blue. So both the sun and the moon, there was all these particles in the air that scattered all the light but blue light. And this was in 1950. I didn't know about this. Let's check this out. In 1950, there were huge wildfires in Canada. Started in British Columbia, then spread mostly into Alberta. And the Chinchaga fire in 1950. The 1950 Alberta wildfires were dominated by the Chinchaga fire, burning from June to October across northern Alberta and northeastern British Columbia. It consumed approximately 3.5 to 4.2 million acres, making it the single largest recorded forest fire in North American history. Wow, I didn't know about this. And so the smoke from the forest fires in Canada, it traveled across North America and over to Europe. And here's the weird thing is a lot of people, they noticed that the sky was all hazy, but the news didn't really get out about what was happening because it was so remote that it wasn't like they had, CNN telling everybody or the internet. It was like, oh, what's going on? And then in Scotland, people saw the sun and the moon appearing to be blue. Which imagine that. That's pretty weird. So that was 1950. So, but what is a blue moon? Where did the phrase come from? The earliest known usage was in 1528, and it was in a book called "Read Me and Be Not Wroth, for I say nothing but troth." Read me and be not wrathful, I guess, for I say nothing but truth. It was an anticlerical pamphlet published by William Roy and Jerome Barlow in 16th century England. So we're talking, 60 years before Shakespeare. And it includes this phrase. This is the earliest known usage. If they say the moon is blue, we must believe that it is true. And what they're saying is they're mocking the clerics. They're mocking the clerics who are saying, if they say something, we're supposed to believe it's true no matter what. So they're mocking that. And so from this, we discern that maybe the phrase blue moon is something that's supposed to be absurd. It meant something obviously ridiculous. Essentially, the moon is made of green cheese, or we're supposed to believe 2 + 2 = 5. We're supposed to believe the moon is blue. Pigs can fly. So originally, blue moon was a metaphor for absurdity or impossibility, according to this source. And we don't know how far it went back after that because we don't have any sources. But then there is the next thing you hear about is that there was a Maine Farmer's Almanac in the 19th century. And now this is not the old Farmer's Almanac. It's a different publication. I had to look that up because I wanted to know. And the phrase blue moon is used in a technical seasonal sense. So this is not, so what it meant, this is weird. This is not going to make sense at first. It meant the third full moon in a season that contains 4 full moons. So a season being the seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall. And the seasons, of course, they're defined astronomically. They don't depend on the calendar. The dates depend on the calendar, but when winter happens, when the solstice happens, it doesn't matter how you're keeping track of the days. It just is an astronomical thing. So the seasons are astronomical events. Neil, Neil, they're real. Hopefully it satisfies you. And usually there's three, because it's usually they're almost 3 months long, but occasionally, because of the way the moon cycle is off from the months, there is then sometimes a fourth full moon in a season. Like in the spring, sometimes there might be four instead of three, just because of the way it works out. And this happens about every 2.7 years. This happens, but it's the blue moon is not the fourth full moon in the season. It's the third. It's like it's snuck in as it's the one that's it. And the reason is for that I learned is because these the first, second, and third full moon of a season had significance. It had significance in folklore, and it had significance even in the ecclesiastical calendars. And these were the moons that had names, like Harvest Moon or Wolf Moon, etc. They were named because they were the first, second, or third full moon in a season. Is why, according to this source I read. But what happens if you have four? Well, you still want the last one to be the last one, I guess. You want the fourth one to be the last one. You don't want to mess with that. So you take up that slack with the third one, and that's the blue moon. So every 2.7 years that happened, and that was the definition that you'll find supposedly in some sources from the 19th century, early 20th century. And then what happened is there's an article here. So this is Sky and Telescope magazine. Oh, I used to read Sky and Telescope magazine. I used to love it because I was a geeky astronomy kid. And so in March of 1946, so it's about amateur astronomy, Sky and Telescope. It's sort of like, star observation, planetary observation for amateur astronomers and professionals. And there was an article in the March 1946 edition of Sky and Telescope called "Once in a Blue Moon." It was written by J. Hugh Pruitt of University of Oregon. And coincidentally, the cover of the magazine is about Portland amateur telescope makers, Portland, Oregon. I had to make sure. So just coincidence, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, he wrote an article, and he said he was trying to find out the origin of the blue moon thing, and he went to the University of Oregon library, and he did a bunch of research, and he found the reference in the Maine Farmer's Almanac, and but he misinterpreted it. And he put forth the idea that it's the second full moon in the month. And this is and then it's stuck. It's sort of stuck after that. So, I see what's the real definition of a blue moon. Who cares, right? It's whatever we want to say a blue moon is, right? So our modern definition is as good as any other, but it's good to know that there are other definitions. There's at least one other astronomical definition. And the next seasonal full blue moon will be next year. So here's a little chart. You got the second full moon in a month. The Sky and Telescope definition is the dark circles. If you can see the screen, there's a little chart here. And Maine Farmer's Almanac rule is also there too. So we've got to 2026 in May. And then a year from now in May, there'll be the Farmer's Almanac rule. The full moon then will be a seasonal full moon. And then you can see there's going to be like one each of them on up through 2025. I wonder if I forgot to ask is there a full moon that can be both the Sky and Telescope definition and the modern, we'll call it the modern definition, and the and the Maine Farmer's Almanac definition? I don't know. It might be possible or might not. But anyway, it's in the news. I like this. Speaking of Oregon, this is the Statesman Journal is the newspaper in Salem where I went to college, and I like this. It just popped up in my feed. I once I have a little piece of paper in my stuff, which is my which is the pass that was given to me by my physics professor to go up to the roof of the science building in my college in Salem and be able to use the 8-inch telescope that was up there. And I could use it at my pleasure for the whole spring. It expired at the end of the semester in spring of 1988. And I still got it. I found it the other day and I was like, oh, it's too simple. I can't throw it away now. I got to keep it. It brought back seeing it, everybody, it's good to go out and look at things in the sky. It's good to go out and look at things in the sky. Anyway, this popped up in my feed, so I decided, oh, that's good. I got to show you that. Okay, so that's the blue moon. What's the micromoon? What do we got with the micromoon? What's that? Okay, so let's talk about the micromoon. Let's look at the comments. Sammy the Squirrel, every time I was in the Northwest, it was overcast and raining, very gloomy feeling. Yeah, that does happen. Green Ozone, there's a special dance for the blue moon. I think we need one. We need one. All right. Ray Carr, I own a telescope that basically brings the moon into my living room and got hooked on astronomy at age 10. There's something so compelling about telescopes. They're just so, there's an aesthetic that's just so compelling about it. And people that build their own telescopes, yeah, that's a really cool thing. All right. Kindly hit the like button for Matt. Yes, please, if you're liking the show tonight, please do. Please do give me a like. All right. We're just having fun talking about the moon in the midst of a choppy news week after Memorial Day. Eleanor 2000, thank you, Matt. Many lives lost across unnecessary wars that broke the hearts of so many. Yeah, how bittersweet it is to, somebody, dies for their country, for our nation, and but you lose that person. And there's, do you live with that the rest of your life? And some people don't get over it. Misbehaving Irishman. I am related to a former leader of Austria in the 1960s, Julius Robb. Never heard of it. Okay. Okay. All right. Candy B. One Matt is telling me a bedtime story. Good night, everyone. Good night. I hope, I would do that if I had a show later at night. I would just just kick back and we'll take you on home, take you to the dreamland. We're sort of doing that with the moon tonight. Ray Carr, I was just thinking about St. Helens. Yeah, I didn't know the moon looked blue from that, Okay. All right. So, but let's take the micromoon. What's the micromoon? Micromoon is a different thing altogether. So it has nothing to do with the moon being blue, either literally or because of the calendar, because of the seasons, whatever. It's a different thing. And the micromoon is when, well, you've heard of supermoon, and the micromoon is the opposite. It's when the moon appears near to being its smallest in size in the sky. The supermoon, it looks the biggest, and every time the supermoon's coming around, it's like, oh, there's a supermoon. Well, you think it's really rare, but it doesn't. It seems to happen quite a bit, and it does. It happens multiple times a year, according to the definition they give. And the micromoon is when it appears smaller. And this is the first time I'd even ever heard of the micromoon, to be honest. Now, there's a graphic on the screen. Full moon at near the point where the moon is at its smallest, apparent size in the sky. There's a graphic on the screen. I like this graphic. It's just a nice little topic. Doesn't have anything to do with politics, or wars, or anything like that. But the moon, if you can see the graphic, it's got two sizes of the moon. It's got one with a yellow boundary to it, and it's got with a blue boundary to it, by coincidence, even though it doesn't have anything to do with the blue moon. And it says, well, here's the size when it looks the smallest, and here's the size that looks the biggest. So you can see it's different, although you may not notice it in the sky, because we don't have two of them side by side to compare. But it's actually smaller as it's not like the smallest it's ever going to be. I had to ask Chat GPT about this. I said, well, is it mean it's the smallest it can ever appear? It's like, nah. It's just that it's near to that. It's near to being that. It can be a little bit off actually. So it's like, oh, okay. And being a little bit off, it actually doesn't matter that much. It's still pretty small, but that's what the micromoon is. And so it's 12% smaller in its apparent size, its apparent width in the sky than a normal moon, or then maybe the biggest 12% smaller than the supermoon, maybe. Okay. Now, why does this happen? Well, it happens, of course, because it's farther away. The moon's farther. Of course, the moon doesn't actually grow or shrink in size. It's just a little bit farther away. And that's okay, right? You know, the moon moon draws nearer to us, and it gets farther from us. And maybe you didn't know that. Maybe you didn't know that the moon varies, and it actually does that once a month. It goes through that cycle where it goes as it goes around the Earth. And once every 27 and a half days, it does this, where it's at its nearest point to us, and then it's at its farthest point from us. But that when it's at its nearest or farthest point, it doesn't always line up with a full moon. That's the thing. So when that lines up nearest to being a full moon, that's when you get either the supermoon or the micromoon. And that's what we're having here at in this weekend. We're having a micromoon in addition to it being a blue moon. So, you know, you can go out and look at the full moon and decide for yourself, does it look smaller than normal? Now, this doesn't account for the effect that we all know about, where the moon appears to look larger when it's the full moon. It appears to look larger when it's near the horizon. That is utterly an optical illusion. It's completely an optical illusion. This is one of the most surprising things it's like, no, it's actually bigger. No, it just looks bigger. It looks bigger, which shows you, you know, how subjective it is when we're judging the size of the moon, full moon. But a little bit about the moon's orbit. The moon's orbit is elliptical. It's actually not elliptical, but we'll get to that in a moment. The moon's orbit is elliptical, so its distance from Earth varies. Perigee, that's when it's the closest to us, it's about 226,000 miles. Apogee, when it's the farthest away, so that'd be the micromoon, it's about 252,000 miles away. And so that accounts for it, because when things are farther away, they look smaller. It's as simple as that by the laws of geometry and perspective. There's nothing more to it than that. But it's sort of cool, right? It reminds us that the moon is an interesting thing that doesn't just keep the same distance to Earth. It varies, right? So when a full moon occurs near apogee, farthest away point, it appears slightly smaller in the sky. It is slightly dimmer than the average full moon. Slightly dimmer. Its apparent angular diameter is about 14% smaller than a supermoon full moon occurring near perigee. Its brightness is roughly 25 to 30% less than a supermoon. Okay. Most people do not notice the difference by eye unless they compare photographs or observe a perigee and an apogee full moon side by side. One interesting point, although headlines often call it the smallest full moon of the year, the exact smallest full moon occurs when the full moon and apogee are very closely aligned in time. If apogee occurs a day or two before or after the full moon, it is still called a micromoon. So there's a lot of tolerance, but it may not be the absolute smallest possible full moon. The moon's distance changes by roughly 42,000 kilometers, so it's about 30,000 miles between perigee and apogee over the half an orbit. 13 and a half, a little less than 14 days. So every 14 days it goes through this side, goes from one to the other. That's an average rate of about 3,000 kilometers per day. Let's call it 2,000 miles per day of variance, though the actual rate varies. So if a full moon occurs exactly at apogee, the farthest away point, truly the smallest full moon possible for that cycle, one day from apogee, it's come back in a little bit closer to the Earth, only about 2,000 miles closer. 2 days from apogee, perhaps 4,000 miles closer. So it's still farther away than normal. And I don't know if on Sunday how close it is to the apogee. That's what I forgot to ask. Would it like to know? I almost want to like, what's the super micro moon when it's like right when it really nails that point? I don't know, but it doesn't make that much difference to its size because because of the way that the orbit works. To give a sense of scale, the moon's apparent diameter varies approximately from. All right, so this is an interesting fact. The moon is about it's about half of a degree, an angular degree in width. So that would be about 30 arc minutes. So there's 60 minutes in a degree of an arc. 60. You have 360 degrees in circle. Every degree is 60 minutes. So it's a 60th of a degree. And so they're called arc minutes. And so 30 is half of a degree. And so the moon varies from just under half a degree to just a little over half of a degree in width. And an arc minute, a good arc minute diameter is your pinky. Your pinky, if you hold your arm at length and raise up your pinky, not your middle finger, but your pinky, then that's about a degree. So a full moon, and this is really hard to believe, I think, that you hold up your pinky and you can cover at distance and you can cover the full moon and the sun, because the sun is almost the same size too. It's actually the full moon and the sun are about half the width of your pinky. And you say, but Matt, your pinky might be a different size than my pinky. Yes, that's true. But your arm is also probably a different length too. If you have a smaller pinky, you might have a smaller arm. And so it means it's the same width of angle as you look out. So just a good thing to know. So, it's all just geometry. It's all just, as farther away a thing is, the bigger it is. So yeah, the angular size of the moon we're talking about here in the graphics here on the screen. Here's an interesting image. I like this. This is either the moon rising or it's the moon setting. It's one of the two. It could be either. And it's don't stare at the sun, Sammy the squirrel. Yeah, I was like, okay, let's do this with. It's like if you're going to do it with the sun, you have to be really careful. You actually want to, cover the sun with your pinky and keep it steady, and just look at it briefly because your hand moves around, you're going to be hit by the sun. So don't do that. I did it, but I'm a professional. Okay. All right. Fun facts with Matt, says Trumpet. Yes, thank you. Thank you. All right. Squint. Yes, squint. Okay. But don't even do that, So anyway, this is the moon either rising, full moon, either rising or setting. And you'll notice that as it does so, it's the same size in the sky. Now, I just told you the moon changes its size in the sky, but that happens over the course of the month. And it doesn't really happen over the course of a couple hours at night. So the size of the moon when it's rising, full moon when it's rising, and when it's a couple hours later in the sky is going to be almost the same. Only a tiny, tiny bit difference that you wouldn't notice. It doesn't change that fast. So when it's near the horizon, it looks bigger. Now, why does it look bigger? I could sit here and tell you it happens because it's next to other objects on the horizon that distorts the scale. But there are arguments against that. I don't know what they are. I'm just sort of remembering that it's not completely universally accepted why this optical illusion happens, where the full moon looks bigger. But it is an optical illusion because as it rises, then it stays the same size. It stays the same size. And over the course of days and half a month, but by then it's no longer full though. So, you have that. Now the sun, by the way, the sun also does change its angular diameter. It does so over the course of a year. And it does so because the Earth is actually farther away from the sun at different times of year. And it's always the same time of year. The Earth is closest to the sun on the first week of January. I think on the third of January. The Earth is slightly closer to the sun, and then 6 months later, it's at its farthest away point. And because of that, the sun actually looks slightly smaller in January than it does in July. But it's a very small difference because the Earth's orbit is almost perfectly circular. And so you don't ever really notice it. And it doesn't have any effect on it has nothing to do with the seasons or how much heat the Earth gets. Because it's the winter in the northern hemisphere when the sun is closest. That should tell you that it doesn't. It's not, the seasons aren't due to that at all. So and then in the southern hemisphere it's the opposite. So it wouldn't make sense. Logically, that wouldn't make sense, right? That it has anything to do with it, and it doesn't make any sense. Although something just hit me. I remembered from when I was a kid. There was you remember some of you may remember there was a TV show, Lost in Space, about the Robinson family, and they basically marooned in space trying to get back to Earth, and they got their robot with them. And they got Dr. Smith, who's like just a mischief maker. But there was one episode of Lost in Space I remember seeing when I was a kid that I was very fascinated by, which was they were on a planet. They were always landing on another planet. It's like, oh, here's another planet. And they landed on a planet. They could never find Earth, but they landed on this planet. And it had a highly elliptical orbit where it would get very close to its star, and then it would get very far away from the star over the course of its year. And its year was very short. So they actually on their time in the planet, they lived through both of these extremes. So they had to cope with it being really cold, and then they had to cope with it being searingly hot, and of course they survived. But that would be a case where the seasons do depend. If the Earth's orbit was like that, then the seasons would depend on where the Earth is in its orbit. But it has not. The seasons, of course, on Earth have nothing to do with that. But it's good to. I don't know. It's good to keep in mind that the constancy of, we call it the angular diameter of the moon, at least over the course of a night. And always the constant diameter of the sun, but very, very little change. It's always the same thing. I had to throw this in because there's some really stupid arguments from flat earthers that just flat out ignore this aspect of that the moon keeps us, even as it's setting or rising. It doesn't, the way the flat earthers make their arguments, the moon would have to get smaller over the course of or the sun, but both of them would have to get smaller over the course of the day or evening, because it's getting so farther away, because it's the Earth and the moon and the sun are supposed to be so close. But both of them are far away enough that it doesn't matter over the course of a day. There's no real effect from that. So, but they're impervious to any kind of logic or reasoning, in my opinion. Angular diameters of the sun and the moon to scale. Of course, you may know that the weirdest thing about the universe, about our whole universe setup, is that our moon and our sun have almost the same angular diameter in the sky. The sun is a lot bigger, but it's a lot farther away, and it's farther away in just the right ratio so that it looks almost exactly the same size as the full moon, which is just absurd. That's just crazy that they're almost exactly the same size. Some people think that's not an accident. Maybe it's not. I can't. It seems like a coincidence that's beyond imagination to think that. Now, but the moon does change size more extreme than the sun, which is almost the same size always. Sometimes the full moon is slightly bigger than the sun. Sometimes it's slightly smaller than the sun. And likewise, a new moon during an eclipse. That's why sometimes you have an eclipse where the moon covers the whole sun, And sometimes you have a solar eclipse where the moon doesn't cover the whole sun. You get a ring of fire eclipse. So, but the fact that they're so close is just, well, I don't know. Can we come up with a theory that explains that why that would happen? So with the moon, if you have an eclipse and the moon's at its apogee, it's not going to cover the whole sun. That's where you get the ring of fire eclipse. By the way, we don't want to show these graphics with the Earth and the moon without reminding us that they're not to scale. Here's one that's to scale. Here's the size of the Earth and the moon, in case you're wondering. At a distance, of course, this is not the distance it always is. It goes in and out. Moon goes in and out. But here's the sizes here. And what, do I have another one? Here's another one. Here's the Earth and the moon with their to scale. Here's the scale. So when the astronauts go to the moon, so this gives you a little bit of idea, I think, too, about the difference, like with the Artemis mission versus just going up in a normal space station. When you go up to the space station, or when you're orbiting around the Earth, it's so close to the Earth that it's not even, if you drew it on this diagram you're seeing here, you wouldn't even see it being different, any space between it and the Earth. It's basically just a little bit above, about 250 miles up, which is not the edge of space. Edge of space is about 62 miles up, but still 250 miles is nothing. It's still really close. And if you do geosynchronous satellites, they have to be a little bit farther out, and there would be a little bit distance, but it's not very much. Now, when we go to the moon, we're going way out there, and that's just to the moon. Mars, etc., is just a tiny little target, way, way far away. Have to show that sometime in a graphic. But it's you can imagine it's a little bit more of a challenge to then the moon is a moving target too. You say, well, the Earth and the moon, they're both moving in space. It's like, yes, but we can consider that it's happening in an Earth-centered, what we call a moving reference frame, where we don't have to worry about the part that the Earth is moving through space too, except a little bit of effect of that we have to take into account, but it's not a big effect, which is good. So, okay. Ellipse. So the moon is an orbit around the Earth is an ellipse. What's an ellipse? An ellipse was discovered in ancient times. Apollonius is the first to write about it, but probably not discover it. Ancient Greek mathematician. So an ellipse is part of a family of curves that you can create by slicing a pair of cones that are sort of nose to nose. And if you slice one of the cones like horizontally, you get a circle. I think you can all see that. If you slice it at a bit of an angle, you get an ellipse. It's a flattened circle. It's not just any oval, it's a special oval. If you slice it straight up and down, you get a pair of what are called hyperbolas. And if you slice it parallel to one of the sides of the cone, you get a parabola. All these are perfectly valid definitions of these types of curves, but they have other definitions too. They have definitions from algebraic geometry, it's called, which are you use equations to describe curves. And there you have an ellipse. You can define an ellipse too. It has a special distance. The longest distance across an ellipse is called the major axis. And then the smallest distance across is called the minor axis. And they have special meanings. They're actually useful in orbital mechanics. But we don't want to get too far into that tonight. We're just playing it light. We're just having fun with the moon. But you can draw, how you can draw an ellipse is that the ellipse has two special places called foci, two foci. And so the way you draw an ellipse is you take a string, doesn't matter what length, it just has to be longer than the distance between, we're going to put two pins. You put two pins down in a piece of paper, and they'll be a certain distance apart. Doesn't matter how far apart. And then you make a string, and it should have some slack. How much? It doesn't matter. It's always going to be an ellipse. And then you just use that string to draw around, and that's an ellipse. That's the same. You can prove it mathematically. We're not just saying it's the same thing as the cone version from ancient Greece. You can prove it. You can prove it with algebraic geometry and any other methods. You can prove that this is exactly the same type of curve as the ones you get by slicing a cone. And it shows up in orbital mechanics. It shows up in orbits of things around each other due to gravitation. This was discovered by Johannes Kepler. I should have a picture of him. And people say, well, the moon's orbit is an ellipse around the sun, around the Earth. It's not quite, for reasons. It's a distorted ellipse, and I'll explain why in a moment. The ellipse, if you have just two bodies and they're rotating around each other, one can be a lot heavier than the other, or they can be about the same. It doesn't matter, but let's just assume it's like the sun and the Earth. If you just have two and only two, and they're small, they're point-like, it will always be a perfect ellipse, the orbit, from gravitation, from Newtonian gravitation, and you can prove that. The person who discovered that was Johannes Kepler. So the orbits of the planets around the sun are ellipses. They're ellipses. They're not circles, they're ellipses. And the sun is at one of the two foci. What's at the other? Just empty space. There's nothing there. But that's it. You put the sun and then the planet, it'll always be. And this was, it's hard to overstate the importance of the discovery of this in the history of civilization. In fact, I'm going to be on General Quast's show next week for part 2 of the series I'm doing with him on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. And I'm going to pick up where we left off at the last one, if you saw that. And I'm going to mention this. This is that we're going to talk about the true significance of the scientific revolution. And I think it really begins with Kepler, in a sense of what he did was really change civilization and reorient us towards a mathematical mindset about the universe in a way that we had never had before in the history. And how he discovered this law that the orbits of the planets are ellipses with the sun at one focus. How he could figure that out is just amazing. One of the greatest intellectual achievements of all time. Anyway, I'm going to talk about that on his show. So tune in if you're interested in that. But we do not live in a universe where so well, what about the Earth? The Earth is an ellipse, but it's almost a circle. You see, a circle is a special case of an ellipse. Yeah, I bet you can understand it. You can understand that. You just imagine pushing the two pins together until they're right on top of each other, and then you just draw around, and so your string is just a straight up, out and back loop of string. And what would you draw? You draw a circle, right? But it's still technically it's an ellipse. It's just the two foci are right on top of each other. Now the Earth has the most. By the way, the Earth has the most circular orbit of any known planet. I don't know if any of these ones they've discovered around other stars, maybe, but in the solar system, definitely it's the most circular. Way more circular than Mars and any of the other planets. And that's sort of a good thing. That's a really good thing. It means the Earth is the same distance from the sun almost all the time. It really stabilizes the Earth's climate and right in a zone where water is liquid, which is not a big zone. If the Earth were closer in, water wouldn't be liquid. It'd just be water vapor. And if it were farther out, it would just be ice. So, we live on a miracle planet. We live on a real miracle planet. And, I don't know how to overemphasize that. Yeah, the Earth is not even a sphere, right? But I've heard it said this, but no, it's not. Earth is not itself not a sphere. But if the Earth were shrunk down to the size of like an orange, it would be much. It would be way more smoother than any orange. It would feel very smooth. And it would feel very round. So anyway, all right. Okay, so that's an ellipse. Now I said that the the planet's orbits really aren't ellipses. They're a little bit tweaked off from ellipses, even the Earth, and that's because they don't interact with the sun in isolation. They also interact with each other. Like the Earth feels a little bit of gravitation from Jupiter and from the other planets, and that tug pulls it away from being an ellipse. And it also makes the ellipse sort of rotate in space over time, so that the major axis I said is the long distance, and the minor axis, however, whatever those are for a planet, they're gonna shift over time, and that's because of the pull from other planets. And so the moon's orbit around the Earth is the funkiest orbit that we know about in the solar system. To calculate the moon's orbit around the Earth to a high degree of accuracy requires a lot of tiny little corrections that come from the pull of they come from a lot of things. They come from the fact that the Earth is not completely spherical. They come from the fact that the moon is not completely spherical. The Earth has is sort of a lumpy density. They come from the tug of other planets, especially Venus pulls on the moon every time it sort of passes around on the inside of the Earth, pulls a little bit on the moon enough to keep the moon a little bit tweaked off from being an ellipse. But you do a good job. Everything we do in science, we do it like we're going to do our first approximation based with the most simple model we can get away with. So okay, let's just consider it to be an ellipse, and until we need a higher degree of accuracy, and then we'll figure out a way to tweak it. That's the way science works, right there. It's one of those things it can be hard to get when you're learning science, but that's why if you take a physics class, you learn these really basic things like, oh, let's consider but it's not an ellipse. It's like, yeah, but that's what you start with, and then you tweak it a little bit as you need to, and that's what that happens with the moon. But the moon, underneath it all, the moon has a really interesting orbit. It's close enough to being an ellipse, though. Okay, and then okay, so we went through our ellipses, sun and the moon. We got Earth, Moon, Sun system is just the textbook what we call the three-body problem, which is when you have two things pulling on each other with gravitation is an easy problem to solve. It's an easy problem to solve. Kepler solved it, and Kepler came up with the laws of it, and then Newton came up with a system of laws that predicted all of the laws, including Kepler's laws. That's why Newton was a great revolution. And the universe sort of works like the clock. It keeps on. So anyway, June of 2026 is not going to be this is next month, and there's not going to be a blue moon next month. And you never get them 2 months in a row by any definition. Next full moon after Sunday's full moon, will be on the 30th of June, which will not be during GART. Which I should say we need to remind our viewers that yes, we've got GART 12 is coming up, and you can get your tickets right now. And so Great American Rescue Tour Part 12 is June 25th through 28th, just before the next full moon after next Sunday. And we've got all your favorite Badlands hosts are going to be there in Deadwood, South Dakota. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/events. Everybody loves Deadwood. My experience listening to other hosts is that Deadwood's. I've been to Deadwood, but not for GART. And it seems like everybody's favorite GART is the Deadwood ones. Oh, I've got YouTube comments. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Babbage3. Hello, Amy Lane 7203. Hello, Ms. Mauser. Hello, Wendy Russell. Oh, yes. Ms. Mauser says, really good World War II movie, Hell is for Heroes, Fess Parker, Steve McQueen, Bob Newhart, James Coburn. Thank you. I'll put that on my list. I've never seen it. Hello, Badlanders. I forgot that I don't have to watch the YouTube feed to see the YouTube comments. Paul D1699, Flat Earth, brother, firmament above, NASA bull, stupid talk. It's not, Flat Earth is just not logical at all to me, given the evidence in front of my eyes. And I believe God gave me reason to figure out those things. He gave us reason. And so I have to disagree with you there. All right. But I realize there's people in the audience. So I respect that you disagree, though. You feel free to disagree. But I think it's like 2 + 2 = 5, to go back to that, to say that. All right. I have to stick up for what I believe, and from my own senses and what I've reasoned towards. All right. Pretty cool sight on scale of our solar system, Spetzel says. Solar to scale. Cool. All right. Solar to scale. Sleep state. Kepler discovered gravity, not Newton. In a way, he discovered the laws of gravitation, but he didn't. What thing Kepler didn't do as significant as his laws were, number one, he didn't provide a dynamical principle, like why are these the laws of planetary motion? That's what Newton furnished. He gave a law of gravitation that predicted Kepler's laws. And what Newton did that Kepler certainly did not do is Newton unified gravity that we experience here on Earth with the gravity that keeps the moon in orbit. Newton's reasoning of that in the Principia is what changed civilization. He made one law that functioned everywhere on Earth and in the heavens. And Kepler didn't anticipate that or know that. And that's why Newton, we say, discovered the laws of gravitation. Now, of course, there's Einstein and general relativity, and there's all that thing. So, but this is long before that. Most of whenever you need to invoke gravitation in physics, Newton is perfectly fine. Newton will do you well. Misbehaving Irishman, barmaid. Okay, I see. All right, good. All right, let's. So thank you for everybody watching on YouTube. I really appreciate it. All right. Where are we? We're at 7:20. So we did GART, and we've also sponsored tonight by who's our other sponsor? Oh yes. Sorry, probably screamed into the microphone. Don't need to do that. We've got Soft Disclosure as our sponsor.
In a quiet town where beards grow wild and lips dare to crack without permission, one woman has suffered.
Hi, I'm Margie, and I'm Jatriot's mother.
But the world would come to know her by another name, Madame Margie, the moistureless.
Jay came home with a lip balm. It's called Soft Disclosure.
With one miraculous application, her power awakened.
Within one day, my lips were healed. It was miraculous.
But salvation came at a cost. For in the shadowed lands known only as Badlands,
You boys at Badlands are so handsome.
she saw potential.
You're covering up your beautiful faces.
And she made her demand.
Shave them all off,
Or face the consequences. Beard oil will not save you now.
and you'll look so much better.
This summer, moisturize wisely and guard your beard. Because Madame Margie, the moistureless, is always watching.
Okay, so I'm going to send you over to OnlyLands here in a minute. I don't know if I'm going to be on OnlyLands. John is starting a new system. He just started this. He just announced this a couple days ago. He wants there to be more rotation of people on OnlyLands. And so it's going to be, you have to sign up now as a Badlands host to say, I'd like to be on these nights. And then he's going to pick, and he's going to shuffle it around. So I don't know. He hadn't really indicated who's going to be on. Maybe I can go check. I got to go check and see if I'm going to be on. If not, then I'll see you guys next week. It's been really great having you. Thank you for coming by. No, there's no announcement. So here we go. Hey, okay. He says we're not going to have you on tonight. John says if everybody signs up, the goal will be getting people 2 to 3 a month, including me. Going to put out an actual schedule soon. Okay, so I'm not going to be on OnlyLands tonight, which I'm fine with. So, but I'm going to send everybody. Let's go over there. Let's do the raid, though. Let's do the raid. So, all right. I think I've got the Spetzel, I know you. If you're there, you're probably going to send me the link. But I have it right here this week. I actually have it. So, all right. Okay. So I'll be on OnlyLand some other time, I guess. So yeah, we're gonna raid, and then I'm gonna play off while we're doing the raid, and I'll see you guys all next week. Thank you everybody for coming by. I'm glad you came by for the lunar chill stream tonight, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay. What are those? Anybody still with me? I'm going to play the outro since we got a little bit of time. Okay. Outro closed.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.